And now, brothers and sisters, if you'll please remain standing, we have the wonderful opportunity to hear from the great Kahan, Ilya Heiler, Hawkins.
Praise God. One thing I would like for each and every one of you to do before you're seated, I would like for each and every one of you to give yourself and everyone in here a round of applause for following underneath our great teacher. You may all be seated. As a team, underneath the authority of our great teacher, just as the great Kahan just said, we have actually started the greatest seminars in mankind's history. Now, some people may have a number in their mind of what success may be. Well, how many people did we reach? How many people came? Well, I can tell you right now, it is mind-blowing. And the peaceful solution in the character book on page 125, it says a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Well, I can tell you these seminars took off running. They didn't take off walking. They literally took off running. Praise God. I want to talk about some of the things that we've seen in these seminars from the men and women that were teachers, that were students, that sat in the groups and maybe answered the questions. You can tell these books being applied when someone applies them. You can hear the voice, the information of our teacher coming through as the teachers quote these books. As they taught their classes from character all the way up to management skills, which was leadership. You could hear these things in the voices of everyone. It was a great pleasure to see men who had been training for a long time. Men who were just in a speech class, who just couldn't get up in front of a group of people. And I'm sure there's women that were the same way. But they stood at these seminars and were some of the best teachers, the best teachers that the world has to offer today. One thing that set us apart was we believe in what we're saying. We've put it to work in our life. We know it works. We're not someone out there trying to sell a product because we want some money so we can go on vacation. No, we want a better place for us, our children, and this world. When we teach character, we understand that combination of our morals and beliefs, that those morals are the rules. They are the laws of Yahweh that govern us. And it's our belief in those rules, that how much those laws will benefit us, that we're teaching. And the peaceful solution is so strong, is so wrapped up in the laws of Yahweh, you cannot have one without the other. You cannot have one without the other. I want to get into a little bit of feedback we had. I hope most of you had the honor of watching a man that we interviewed from Lagos, Nigeria. We actually interviewed him live during the conference, and then the next day the women actually interviewed a woman from Lagos, Nigeria, pushing forth the peaceful solution. Some of you had the ability to go on and see how many people were actually logged on during the seminars. You know, but one thing's in numbers you can't see on the other side of the computer. So I want to give you a little bit of numbers situation on how these things occurred. In Nigeria alone, one computer represented at least 30 people. They were shooting the seminars up on a projection screen just like this. That one computer represented at least 30 people. That was the smallest number I got. This morning alone, the work of Yahweh starts very early. We've talked with people from the UK, Nigeria, Morocco, the Netherlands, Holland, Kenya, Ghana, the Philippines, Canada, Trinidad, Mexico, and Jamaica. Just today alone. Now, before I got up here, I was speaking with a Kahan, and he was telling me that on the website, at one time we had over 40 different countries hitting the website at one time. At one time. We haven't got to the big numbers yet, though. I want to read some of the feedback we were getting during these seminars. And these were from people from overseas. We got a lot of feedback from people in the United States, but these feedback that I'm going to give you at this time are people that our satellite don't reach. They live out of range of our satellite, so they're not actually able to see the things that we're blessed with here. And the things in the United States and all over the world, there's still parts that we don't reach. One of the things that we got back, now this was actually on I'm going to go ahead and say the name of the place. It was actually on Facebook. And a gentleman said, well, I watched it on Ustream and loved it. I've heard a lot about the Peaceful Solution program here on Facebook. This actually showed me not only what it is all about, but how to teach it. I was amazed that a reporter spoke to a man in Africa through the internet about this program taught here, and about how many were ex-inmates and how this program changed their lives. The things that we went through, the things that we may not understand. Why did we go through these things? Why did Yahweh call me? You have become a great testimony on behalf of the seventh Malach to stand and witness with him through the things you've been through and the things you've overcome. We have all brought these things forth, the things that we've endured, that we couldn't understand. Why are we going through these things? Why? But pastors told us from the beginning, just like Moshe told the children of Israel in Exodus 20:20, Yahweh brought you out to test you and to try you, to see what you would do. And now you have come to his great house to be teachers of the Peaceful Solution. And I just can't say enough about, I seen the men firsthand, and I heard feedback from the women, and there's actually comments on here about both. And it's the joy that's found in this from the people that put their hands to this plow. And I know there's so many people that have their hands to this plow that didn't get to come because their hands were still to the plow while we were up here. They were still keeping the work of Yahweh going, and they keep it going strong. And you may not see that. You may not see that the things you're doing and you're not in the sanctuary keeps it going, but you are. It couldn't be done without the things we're all doing. As a team, all these things are done. This was a man that I was communicating with, and this was in Africa. And I asked him, can you see the video flow? And he said, yes, I can see. The men's internet connection is too slow for them. And he was speaking of his group of people to really enjoy right now. And it's because the internet in Africa is done a lot different than the internet here. But he said, we find it easier to watch the recorded version online. So they were actually watching it as it chopped up, but once it got online, they watched the recorded version. And he said, we will use the recorded seminars in our in-house training. They started this morning with 30 people, training them to go out to teach the Peaceful Solution. Now, what I left out was there's actually 4 other groups in this country that also watch the seminars, and that are watching them actually right now as we speak, training in the Peaceful Solution. At this moment, actually at this time, in Nigeria, there's over 300 people being trained at the Peaceful Solution Summer Seminars right now. Now, keep in mind, that's one country. We also spoke to Ghana this morning. In Ghana, now this is a country, this is a very poor country. Internet service is very hard for them to get. But once these things are put up, you could see Yahweh's hand in all these things. I don't think Pastor's probably the only one that mine can comprehend where we're actually at right now. Keep in mind, these seminars are just like the sermons on Yahweh.com and YisraelHawkins.com. The information, they went everywhere. Everywhere you have internet, they went. And there's people in Ghana, they may live in a straw hut, no walls, dirt floors, but they have internet. I can tell you that they have internet. Right now, there's over 250 people in Ghana sitting in a seminar training to be teachers of the Peaceful Solution. But once again, we still haven't got to the big numbers. This was another message from a man that we've dealt with many, many times, a very loyal man to Yahweh's house. And he sent me, he said, I've longed to see the Peaceful Solution taught from Abelin. We are not in range of your satellite, but we are able to see the Peaceful Solution character education parts live, but for the most part, we had to watch them afterwards. They ran much smoother here for us. And he said he wanted to thank everyone for taking the time and the effort to do so. He went on to say, at this time, by next week, to let us know that they're training over 7,000 teachers in that country. Now keep this in mind. These people are so thankful because of the job that's being done here. The men and the women putting their hands to the plow, getting past the point to where you're shy. I know what it's like to be nervous. Everybody's nervous when they get up before these cameras. Everybody's nervous when they get up to speak. But the calmness sets in when you start repeating the words of the greatest teacher in the world. You cannot go wrong when you do so. Keep in mind, these 7,000 people, they're training them to go out. Now, granted, some of them are children, but I've already seen firsthand what a child can do. I seen that in St. Louis a couple weeks ago. I've seen school teachers, superintendents, talk to young men who just at the age of getting out of high school, and they hung on their every word. Why? Because they spoke with knowledge. Remember, knowledge is power. They spoke with knowledge. They proved the things they had to say. And that's one thing that I really want to rehearse with everyone today. That's what we do in the Peaceful Solution. We prove the things we have to say. Now, these numbers, this is just Sabbath, and we just ended Thursday. These are just preliminary stuff. We haven't seen. I don't think we can understand what's taking place right now. My mind can't. But these things are taking place, and you truly see that big oak tree starting to develop. You truly see it expounding from that little seed that started with a 7th Malach in these last days, an Okie with one strap on his overalls walking around. You see this great work taking place through him. Now, one thing that these people in Africa, these people in the UK, and all the other countries that we mentioned, one thing that they expect from us, this was another comment that they gave. In fact, I want to read it exactly how he gave it to me. And this was that he spoke of a woman that was teaching. His wife came to him. And she said, there was a lady teaching, and she spoke of a book. And she said, I need that book. We need that book. And I asked him, I said, well, what was the topic? And he gave me the topic. And he said it's like as though the person was just flowing so smoothly. And the thing that was inspiring was I asked some members of my family, how did these classes go? And they said, they went so smoothly. It was like some of them were just reading the book, just speaking the words of Yisrayl Hawkins. But these things seem simple, but there's so much power in these things. So much power in these things. And he wrote me, he said, I need that Building More Excellence book. You're going to have to email it to me. You're going to have to put it in the computer. I can't wait in the mail. You're going to have to get it to me. Now that's the conviction we should all have. That's the conviction we should all need. These seminars haven't stopped. The missionary work hasn't stopped. It's only started. I encourage each and every one of you right now, find a place in this work. If you do not have one, find a place. There's open doors everywhere. Jump in one and run a race. Compete for your crown. Don't let any man take it. Okay? It's a very humbling feeling when you talk to someone and they've seen your face, they know you by name. You have no clue to who they are, but they know you by name. And there's women that know the women by name. They know you by name and you have no clue to who they are. You've never met them. You don't even know of them. didn't even know what country they were really from listening to you. But they're hanging on your every word, because they know that if you're teaching from the house of Yahweh, you're hanging on the witness's every word. That means a lot to them. That's why we have to apply ourselves to these books. We have to apply ourselves to let people know us by our speech. When we speak, it's not a dishonor to speak and go, that person has to be from the house of Yahweh. You should find honor in that. Now remember, seminar's still coming up. August the 16th through the 19th. These people are telling people. They're letting people know. No time to slack now. No time to slack at all. During these seminars, when they were laid out, there's one thing that I seen, and I thought, what wisdom in the mind of Yahweh's seventh Mallet. When you look at the way the character education program is laid out for the junior high, it's laid out with character, acceptance, self-control, respect, and responsibility. And then the advanced level is building moral character. And you realize that when you come to the house of Yahweh, you realize that your character is not who you want to be. That this world is not going the direction you want to go in, and you see there's wrong in your life. And you take that step forward to come to the house of Yahweh. And the first thing you have to do is accept that everything that you know is wrong. Everything you've been taught is wrong. You may have a little bit of righteousness, but it's diluted. We all have to accept that fact. And once you accept that fact, you have to start controlling with self-control the things you're going through in your life, to start working to alleviate the negative and accentuate the positive. You have to start doing these things. And once you start doing that, you start developing self-respect for yourself and for everyone else around you. And then the hard job comes when you have the challenge of being responsible for everything you just learned. Being responsible. You know, that's where we're at today. That's where we're at today. If you don't see it in this program, if you don't see how this program's working, go back to the beginning. Go back to the character book and come back from the beginning. Because it works. There's a whole room full of people right here that I know will tell you it works. We've seen many testimonies in the lives of people. Many people we've spoken to, these stories wouldn't they wouldn't have fabricated. These stories wouldn't, let's make them sound really juicy. These were real live stories of what's taking place with people's lives today. These are things that people went through, and each and every person in this room, I guarantee you, has a story of something they went through, something they've learned to come out in these last days, and the things they can see that the peaceful solution is doing for them. Because the peaceful solution, get it in your mind, is nothing more than Yahweh's laws. That's all it is. It's that combination of morals and beliefs. It's that combination of the 613 morals and how much you believe in them. That determines what character you and I have. That's exactly what it determines. And we have to have all of these things to put it together. We have to have them all. I want to read some quotes from the book of Yisrayl. You can write these in your notes. But in the book of Yisrayl, number 1, on page 54, Pastor says that we're now living in the time period when the house of Yahweh would be established to bring forth the peaceful solution. The house of Yahweh would be established to bring forth the peaceful solution, just like Isaiah 2:2 and Micaiah 4:1 says. In the last days, the house of Yahweh would be established and would be the chief of all, and the chief of nations. The chief nation, they would be the highest, that greatest mountain. Well, why are we established? None other than to bring forth this peaceful solution to this dying world. Now, in the 7th book of Yisrayl, part 1, on page 26, in verse 70, Pastor gives us direction. He says, we've got to train our eyes to see and our ears to hear. And the only way that I know of is like Kahan Shaul brought out earlier here. You know the way you gain wisdom is to study, study, study. And the way you study is not your own, but through the house. Through the house. Through the directions of the house. Now on page 27, the next page, this is something that Pastor said that's always stuck in my mind. It's always stuck in my mind. He said, you really need to cram for the exams. And you need to get with your teachers, learn to teach, but learn these books. Learn how you can teach from these books. From these books. Each and every book the House of Yahweh has, learn to teach from these books. Remember, with this peaceful solution right here, you don't know these books, your speech will give you away. One thing that you can't do with the peaceful solution, you can't wing it. Why? Because you have to be applying it in your own life. You have to be putting it forth in your own life. You can't get up and tell a pretty story about how the peaceful solution is going to change the hearts and the minds of the world unless you're putting it in your life yourself. And if you're not applying it in your life, these things will show through. And they will show through very clearly. Remember, we teach not only with our words, but also with our actions. Now, is it unfair for when the world asks us to prove these things? Because when you go out into the world, they tell you, show me. Where's it at in this book right here? Sometimes it seems kind of rude. But should we not expect these things? Have we not been taught these things from the beginning to prove all things? Did the Apostle Shaul not say in 2 Thessalonians 5:21 to prove all things? Have we not been told to do that? If everyone will please turn over to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15, very familiar scripture that I've heard ever since I've come into the house of Yahweh. Pastor once again emphasized these things with cram for the exams. The Apostle Shaul once again telling those who were with him, study to show yourself to prove to Yahweh, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, the law and the prophets. Rightly dividing that truth of the law and the prophets. Brothers, don't forsake yourself in this peaceful solution. Don't think that all I need, I can listen to what someone has to say, but I don't need to read this book. If we didn't need these books, they wouldn't be printed. I don't think any of us understands how much money goes into developing a book. And money is not something we have to throw away in these last days. The only thing we get are the things that are necessary. And at this time, we have to become responsible for what it is we're doing. The things we see, the way we act. We teach with our actions. And we have to be accountable when we're talking to people we've never seen. We've never heard from. We don't know their name. I got a letter this week also from an inmate in prison. He asked me if I would send him pictures of a St. Louis trip. I thought it was kind of funny till I read. He said, Yedidia said the work is going strong. This man went on to say that he said, you really need to ride him because he's on my back all the time. I quit eating pork. But he said, he told me that if I quit eating pork, that my health problems would go away. And he said he learned that from someone he calls the greatest teacher in the world. But you know what? The man said his health problems are going away. He said he's had heartburn for years, but they're going away. But where did these things come from? They don't come forth from us as individuals. They only come forth from learning and studying the things that we've been taught. We're only doing what we want to better society, to better our life for our children, for our children's children, laying down our life to serve another. Laying down our life to serve another. I want to read in the beginning of the responsibility unit, it says how to use this program. And the intro says, it is important that you, the teacher, that's all of us. We're training to be teachers. We must become students first, but we're training to be teachers. Work through these units in the order presented to obtain maximum benefit. If we're going to learn them, we have to apply them in the order that we were given. Then we can give examples. We can't start with the responsibility book and tell somebody about self-control. Now, if you've read them, you know how to lay a foundation. But you can't do it if you start out of order. And it's stressed in these books. In order to obtain maximum benefit, use them in this order. As you explore each unit, you will realize that the issues covered are very relevant to our young people. They're also relevant to each and every one of us. Take as much time as you can to explain the concepts, reiterate, and where possible, and solicit as much student participation as possible. Now, these are things as teachers that we're required to do. This is what it's telling us we need to do. Now, that means we have to have a foundation, correct? We need that foundation. We need that to stand on. As a teacher, when you get up in a class, you want to be able to stand up and know that I can handle this. I can do this. All of us believing in the one whom Yahweh has sent. How many of us would have been thankful to have 100 people? Actually, it was a great program. I really like it. I would have been amazed. But we're talking about thousands of people. Thousands of people who have come out of this world to say, I don't want to partake in this anymore. I don't want this in my life. I don't want this in my community. People coming out saying, you know, you're right. Teachers coming out saying, I don't want to go to a classroom like this anymore. Remember, we've spoke with the teachers. We've heard from the teachers who say, you know what? I went to college for 4 years. I see the violence in schools. I quit. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Can you blame them? Can you blame them for not wanting to risk their lives? Brothers, sisters, we have the answers right here. It's done through these seminars. We've got another month working at it to make this next seminar much better than the last one. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but we're going to do it. I guarantee you we're going to do it. I encourage everyone over this next month to cram for the exam, because those people are going to tell people about these things. They're already talking about them. They already know it's already on the website, and they're talking about them. 40 countries at one time on the website seeing those dates. Expect bigger things, but let's expect more from ourselves also. Let's put our hands to the plow and not look back. Remember, you're speaking to people. I hope everybody leaves this day remembering we're speaking to people we've never met. And we're speaking the words that we've been taught. When you speak these words, you can never go wrong. Just like it says in the Peaceful Solution, the steps are outlined in the procedures for flow and continuity. As a teacher, if you learn these books, you might be a little nervous when you get up there, but I'm telling you, when you know these books, and I know there's many of you that do, because I've sat and watched it, and I'm amazed. I've seen people, I learned more at these seminars watching people who studied these books in 4 days than I think I've learned in 3 months of just sitting and reading in the morning. I've seen so many things that people are learning in these books under the inspiration of our teacher. I encourage everyone, get these books, apply these books, realize these books are life, and prepare yourself for the second greatest seminar to be shown to mankind. And at this time, if everybody will please stand, I'd like to turn it over to the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan, Yisrayl. Shalom, everyone.
We got a crowd today. Wow. You may be seated. I love you, all of you. Praise Yahweh. Been a very exciting week, as you just saw, and I got more to add to that because I want to 72 hours. I want to show you where it was all prophesied, of course, and of course what we're seeing take place now with the seminar, and what a smashing success it was. You know, that's Yahweh's doing, and it's for these last days and for His house to take to the world. You must prophesy again, He says, before many peoples. I know you remember that scripture. I brought it out many times. Don't forget, we need your help. I was just handed another shocker. The dollar is down and the euro went up again because of something somebody said in Washington. You know, they opened their mouths and said this is going to take at least another 5 or 6 years. and of course, that caused the euro to go up and the dollar to go down some more. it would help if they'd have a zipper on some mouths in Washington, I think. You know? Have Barack Obama to stand there and punch them like he did one of the politicians. Hey, don't be saying this. But we do need your help again. Don't forget, I don't know if anyone notices all the or takes the time to stop and think about what it costs to run this house now. 59 countries, they said, they told me this morning, is watching or did watch last week. And of course, we still, our goal, you know, is to reach all of them. And that's what Yahweh is doing right now. But He always starts slow and starts small. And revelations. Now, of course, all the things that are taking place here today, and the peaceful solution that's going out. If you remember, in Yahweh talking about bringing salvation in Zechariah, and He said before the house, He said, "Blessed are the people who were there to hear the prophecies of the house to be established. And blessed are those who were there to see the foundation poured," and so forth. He said, before that day, there was no salvation. Now, surely you remember all of this, because there was no salvation on the earth in this time period. It had all been taken away. The mouths were closed, Yahweh said, for a certain period of time. Of course, we know that that was about 2,000 years. The Pharisees, who later became Catholics, who started crusades long before they changed their name to Universal, but they killed off all the members of the House of Yahweh. That was their job. The Apostle Shaul was doing that. I would like to just bring all that in detail in a hurry, but you know it takes a long time to cover it. But next week maybe I'll get into that part of it. As we go on into these prophecies showing the peaceful solution in these last days. But before that time period, when Yahweh said, "In the last days I will establish my house," and before that time, of course, there was no salvation. But He said, if you remember, there was no peace. The enemy had turned every single person against one another. And of course, this is what we're fighting today. You know, people have a hatred. I've covered this now in several weeks' time, but I see a general resistance. It's almost like a fear of one another, and of course a resentment. It made me think of what I saw when I was a younger man, and I saw the blacks being mistreated in our town, one of the towns that I lived in. And I said, you know, there's enough of us. I said us, because I felt like I was one of them, fighting against what I saw was taking place. The hatred and bitterness, and a black, if you were black, you know, you couldn't go into a cafe or a greasy spoon restaurant or a beer joint or anything like that. I mean, they would serve you at the back door, but they wouldn't let you come in. Well, friends of mine, this really bugged me, because I had friends and that I considered friends at the time, and workers, and I said, why don't you guys get together and start your own business and cut your business off from these people? They said, blacks won't support blacks. I said, this is ridiculous, you know. But this is what Satan has put in the minds. It's a resentment of not wanting to see your brother get ahead or prosper or be successful. And of course, this is something you're going to have to fight, as I've brought out before, this resentment, because it will keep you from entering the kingdom. Our brother Yeshua has already made it, and he was resented with the same resentment that you're harboring in this field of resenting your brother, resentment towards your brother, or resentment towards the house of Yahweh growth, which we have enemies in the house. They don't mean to be. They're here for salvation. It's almost like they're hanging on, thinking maybe they're not right, or fearing they're not right, that the house of Yahweh is not going to make it. But then, if they come to services and we bring out, well, here's what the prophecy said, and here's exactly what's taking place. So this puts a little bit of fear in them, and they can repent for a little while, but they seem to lax back into this attitude. And I know you got it. You know you got it. So the thing to do is repent and get rid of it and start building Yahweh's work, because Yahweh's work is the one that's going to succeed. If you don't believe that, and some don't, you're in pretty bad shape. And you won't be in the Lamb's Book of Life that is very soon to be read. The Revelations, though, I want to get back into Revelations, because Revelation shows the details of the last day's work. It's almost like he went into it in detail to show you each thing that's going to take place, and of course, taking the peaceful solution to all the world, is one of those details that Yahweh prophesied down through the centuries. But then in Revelations, it goes into it in detail and shows you names and time periods and so forth, and actual events that will take place. If you remember, you might turn over there in Isaiah 28 and look at this. If you'll get these prophecies in your mind, like Yahshua did, like he taught his disciples to do. All of these things, he said, must be fulfilled. And if you'll get your mind on those prophecies and start helping to fulfill those prophecies in your support by your mouth as well as your pocketbook, and, start building the house, then you can be a part. You can become a part of this work, and all the rest will be your enemies. Right now, you're trying to keep your foot in the world. Some are trying to keep their foot in the world and one foot in the house of Yahweh, just in case I'm right. Well, the Scriptures have proven that I'm right on everything I've brought. Praise Yahweh! But in Isaiah now, 28 and verse 10, he says, precept must be upon precept. That is, every one of these things, as Yahshua said, they're going to be fulfilled, just as Yahweh showed that they would be fulfilled. And it doesn't all take place tomorrow, but it takes place gradually, growing like an oak tree, the strong oak tree, as Yahshua also said, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little. That is written, here a little and there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue he will speak to his people. Now he's going into a prophecy here about the last day's work and the rest, my rest that Yahshua said I would bring forth, Yahweh prophesied I would bring forth, that would be wonderful in these last days. Look back to Isaiah 8, and here he tells you in no uncertain terms that all the churches in the world are not his. None of them are. He only has one work, and he shows you here in Isaiah 8 and verse 20, and if you'll get your mind set on this, to the law and to the prophecy, if they speak not according to this word, the laws and the prophecy, it is because there is no light in them. Well, if there's no light in them, and then he goes right on up to chapter 9 and starts another prophecy about this last day's work again. It's scattered throughout the book of Yahweh. And of course, in the let's go over to Genesis, because that's where the prophecy started. And if you'll get this in your mind and follow these prophecies and see them being fulfilled as this character education now that Yahweh is offering one last time to the entire world. He's offering to the entire world at this time His peace. His peace. As Yeshua said, my peace I leave with you. Well, no, most people, they wouldn't have any inkling of what he's talking about. This must be some spiritual thing, the hocus pocus diddly-docus, that he uses the magic wand and he does like that, and you fall backwards and that's it. That's it. You get up, your head's still empty. Empty as his hand was. The air went nowhere. He might have pushed it a little ways. All this stuff is stupidity. But the real thing is found right there in the prophecies. And of course, Yahweh gives you this. He says in chapter 49 of Genesis here. Now, if you get this, he shows you what is going to take place in the last days. Not in detail. And if you'll see, if you read the commentators and the way they're struggling, trying to figure out what this man said, they can't do it because it's written here a little and there a little. And of course, you've got to be guided by inspiration. As Yahweh says, I will give power to my witnesses. I'll give them this power and to prophesy. And of course, it comes from Yahweh. So you could search, you could say, well, surely that means this. No, it don't mean that. It's got to mean this. No, you're overlooking this word. It means something else. Well, that's the way they do it, arguing back and forth among one another. Someone told me to tune a show in one day, and they had a group of people that was talking about, the King James Version said, the Lord's Day in Revelations, and they were arguing about what day this was, and I thought, well, man, they're totally missing the whole subject there of what Yahweh is trying to show them. So, they needed a guide, but they don't want to admit they need a guide. I'm the high and mighty. I'm the high and mighty. I go straight to Yahweh. I don't even use Yeshua, they say. They got this high and mighty attitude that they are in direct contact with Yahweh, and of course they couldn't be further cut off from Him. He won't even accept that kind of attitude. And Yeshua tells them so. Unless you humble yourself and get out of this stupidity, you're in no part of my house. You won't be even a part of my house. Unless you can do this, unless you can humble yourself as these little children. And I brought that out. What children is he talking about? Well, the apostles answered that. If you want to get the sermon and listen to it, I'm not going to repeat the sermon, but he tells you in no uncertain terms what children he's talking about. And what you must do to be like those little children and be a part of his work. It's going to be well worth it to get your mind on this and start pushing this work rather than fighting against it. Because this work is going to go. It's going to go throughout the world. And then we're going to be called up and receive our rewards, which is our jobs, or another work to do. But we'll have power in another area that, I was just reading an article this morning. I brought out in an article the real cause of global warming. And of course, a lot of people laughed at this article. Well, there's some scientists that took it serious, and they started working on it. And there's several articles out now about the article that I wrote about the firmament that is being governed by kingdoms, microorganisms, but kingdoms of them. Some of them make it rain in drops instead of letting it all fall down at once. How do you think that would take place? You got tubs of water up there. You got lakes of water in the atmosphere. Why don't it all fall at once? It's heavy. It's heavier than oil. Why doesn't it all fall at once? I told you so in the book, why it doesn't. Well, of course, now the scientists said, well, hey, there must be something to this. And now articles are coming out. Did you know that there's all this many different kinds of bacteria, they say? Well, this is great news now coming from them. One of these days, the earth will find out that the House of Yahweh gave them that great knowledge. But anyway, several articles. If you want to search your internet, I may read you some later. I don't have time for it now. But Yahweh gives this information and He tells you He made this. Well, He's the one that's governing these microorganisms. When He gave the command to make man in 1 day, or make this whole setup in 7 days, He had His microorganisms, kingdoms of them, at His disposal. All He had to do is give the order. Right. It's like mowing this whole 44 acres in 1 day. I did it. Did you hear that? With one finger. I said, come and help. Come and mow them. And you did it. Now this is the kind of authority that I'm speaking of that we're going to be called up to receive. That you could be a part of if you'll change your attitude, humble yourself as a child, stop acting like a deceived person, and get to pushing this work and show Yahweh that you're a part of it. You've got to prove it, because you've got to work yourself into this administration, as the great apostle Shaul said. It's something that you have to work at. You remember the guy said to Yahshua, I'm not worthy that you come to my house. Well, that's a great attitude right there, and it showed Yahshua what he wanted to see in that great attitude. I'm not worthy that you come to my house, but if you just give the word, he said, I understand your position. He said, you can give an order and you can say, like I do. I say, do this, and certain people does it. And he says, I know that when you give the order, certain things take place. Well, he understood that Yahshua actually had power over the microorganisms that could put your eye back in a socket, rebuild an eye. It could, right, praise Yahweh, rebuild flesh, create and maintain flesh. That was what Satan lost, and that's what it's going to be given to us here very shortly. We're in the last part. We're it, brethren. We're the end of this great plan. Well, the last days now, if you see it here in Genesis, of course, he started it before chapter 49. This is all promised to Abraham, but before that it was promised to Abel. And Abel was living this life and teaching these same laws that Abel in these last days are living. And when it refers to the work in these last days, although in places they translated it Jerusalem and Zion, Jethro, if you got that book, or if you'll read our literature, you'll see where we quote Jethro as saying, no, in this time period, this refers to Abel. This is saying Abel here. Can't be translated Jerusalem or Zion. It's Abel, as the great Kohan Yehuda brought out in his sermons, in the words, without Hebrew, without their marks that they changed the words with. Well, here in verse 1 now, Genesis 49 and verse 1. Get this in your head. Then Jacob called his sons and said, gather together so I may tell you what will befall you in the last days. In the last days. Well, if you remember the scriptures, like in Micaiah 4, and so on, Yahweh says, in the last days, this is going to take place. I'm going to establish my house, bring forth the work, offer salvation. Revelation said, showing who's going to do that, and says, now you must prophesy again, but before multitudes, nations, and languages. You've got to do this before everyone, Yahweh said. Well, lo and behold, he opened the door, and it's all going out to multitudes, nations, and languages. And you're going to see this spread like wildfire, because This is the last warning and last offer of Yahweh before the wars take place. Well, he said, then the last days, and then if you look on over to verse 27, he names some people here, a tribe. Now, there's others named too that we'll bring in this study, because this will take a little time. I can't bring it all in one day. But there's other tribes that Yahweh says, he shows here how he's going to use their attributes and their character, and he's going to spread this all over all the world. He's going to allow this to be done. It's already set up. The plan is made. He's not forcing it. He's just allowing. If he allowed mankind to totally take control, they would have already destroyed the earth. But he hasn't allowed it. You know, it's like the study of the atmosphere. They would like to know how to control the atmosphere. For benefit of mankind? No, for benefit of themselves. You know, it's always the self involved. Never to bring forth righteousness or the teaching of righteousness, but to control someone else, another nation or something like that. So if they knew what the firmament actually was and knew how to control it themselves, or to make it obey orders, to obey their orders instead of Yahweh's orders, they would take it and they would destroy nations. Now they're trying to control the food supply, and which they're doing a pretty fine job of that now. Notice the food supply is short, and they're the ones who are in control of this. Yahweh shows the quartet is actually going to bring about starvation to certain countries, and use as Kissinger said, if we can control the food, we can control the people. So this is the attitude that Yahweh doesn't want in his kingdom at all. Praise Yahweh. Aren't you glad? They can control the atom now. You know, they have power to control the atom. Well, look at the power in this atom. You can't see it with the naked eye, but let me tell you, they can even split it and make it more powerful. This is a control that scientists have over the atom. Well, of course, from this has come forth the nuclear bombs. From this has come forth the wars and fighting and the making of money, the selling of money to bring in taxes and more taxes, so they can spend those taxes as they please and create wars and fighting. And as Yahweh said, at the time of his house being established, in this time period, and the time he's going to offer peace to the world, to everyone, he says there is no peace. Everybody is turned against one another. Everyone. And of course, we have to fight this ourselves. We've got to overcome this ourselves. You can't be against Yahweh's work, against me, against one of your brothers here. You can't. You can't. You've got to be a team. You've got to be part of the administration, working for the administration, not against it, or you won't be a part of it, ever. Well, here now in verse 27, he says, in the last days, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the foe, and in the evening he divides the plunder. Well, think of what he's doing here. Control. Look at it. Look at it closely, because Yahweh is talking about control. Control. I want you to turn over to Philippians, because Yahweh chose one man. You know, as Yeshua said, there was a lot of widows in Israel at the time of Eliah, but he only sent Eliah to one of them. Well, he picked out one Benjamite here and showed us, if you'll get the picture, here a little and there a little, he'll open your mind to what is taking place right now from this prophecy that he made back then concerning the 12 tribes that have become a multitude of nations now. They've become a multitude of nations in these last days. They've brought profaneness to all the earth. Profaneness, not righteousness, but profaneness to where there is no love for each other, no justice in the world at all, but every man, every person is turned against his brother. That's what we see from those 12 tribes, that prophecy there. Well, what is this like now? Everybody got that picture? Shake your head like this. Some of you don't have it. Shake your head like this. He's dealing with now a world full of nations, a multitude of nations that came from the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes from Ephraim and Manasseh. He even narrows it down for you more and says, in the last days, this is what you're going to be dealing with. Well, this is what's going to be taught too in the house of Yahweh. He didn't just write this over here for nothing. In the last days, I will establish my house. And then in Jeremiah 23, he says, in the last days, you will understand it perfectly. You should be shaking your head like this instead of like this. You should be understanding this perfectly now. This Genesis, the first book Yahweh inspired to be written, is giving you the prophecy of what the world, the character of the world, the leaders, the kings of the earth, the elders, the rebellious elders, is going to be doing to this earth. And how they're going to be doing it. Well, Revelations gives us the details, but here we see now, he brings forth in Philippians chapter 3, and he brings forth one of the Benjamites to show you what it can be like, what it is like, exactly what it's like, and what we're seeing today throughout the world. These wars that we have going on right now, that our people, the United States soldiers are dying in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Thousands and thousands of people are dying in Afghanistan and in Iraq right now, just those two wars that we got going. If you stop to think about it right now, could you pick up a gun and kill someone? Could you cut their throat or run a bayonet in their body or put them on a stretching board or a water board or whatever that they call and put a person through torture like is going on right now? Well, Yahweh said in this thing that is coming forth from the tribe of Benjamin, that's actually got started in his blood. How did it do it? Because somebody's bed was defiled. Well, this shows you what adultery or fornication can do. That won't be in the kingdom. Not ever. In fact, Yeshua said not even the thought of it will be there. So you better start working on that aspect too. Because from somebody's bed being defiled, the human mind can get messed up. Now, the human mind is a marvelous instrument. And it's going to obtain marvelous authority, marvelous power. You can't even believe. Yeshua gave you a hint of it when he said, if you become like you're supposed to, like this little child, and learn to obey orders and actually let it be a part of your life, I'll guarantee you, he said, you can say to that mountain, be removed and go get in the sea. And every microorganism that holds together that mountain, did you know how many microorganisms there is in a rock the size of my hand? And every one of them is alive. They're made up of kingdoms. Biology in your own schools. In your own schools, if you read a biology book, you will find out that everything is alive. If you could suddenly, this is what I remember about it that amazed me. And I said, that's scriptural. I compared it with Yahweh and what Yahweh said. And that was the start of Yahweh training me to see the microorganisms that He's in control of. I don't remember what year. I was in high school at the time when I read that. But it said, if you could suddenly reduce yourself to the size of a microorganism and get on a piece of hard steel, the hardest steel that you could find, you would find these microorganisms that makes that steel, that forms it. You'd feel them hitting you in the face. They'd be jumping all over you. They're moving. Yes, that piece of steel right there is alive. That can be proven scientifically. Why is it so hard to believe that the wind that hits you in the face is alive? How could you feel it? It's alive and it moves and it does wondrous things, Yeshua said. And Yeshua had control of it. When He said, cease, be still, the wind quit blowing. Now this shows you just some of that authority. The human mind is a marvelous instrument. As King David said, we're wonderfully made. But we're so wonderfully screwed up in these last days that we're all like Benjamites. Like He named the Benjamites, but also the tribe of Judah. If you remember, the tribe of Judah was the last ones to leave. He kept Benjamin there till the last exile, and then yet they were never heard of again. Where did they go? Where did they disappear to? The tribe of Benjamin. Where did they go to? Rome. You got it right. Yeah, that's where they went, to Rome. And they had a mighty empire at that time in Rome, and it's grown. And no, it didn't start from a she-wolf. That's another mystery, another lie, another legend. And when you start reading about where did all this take place, where did this tribe come from? Well, perhaps say this or perhaps that, but they don't know. The fact is they don't know. We're the only ones that know what is going on today throughout the whole earth and where it came from. Praise Yahweh. Well, He brings you now from the tribe of Benjamin. This man called Shaul. And he was trained. He was trained by the Pharisees, who the Benjamites and Judah put together in Israel. The Benjamites, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, his lot was Jerusalem. It controlled Jerusalem. All of that was the Benjamites. Now, if you read Genesis 49, verse 27, you'll wonder, why did He put the Benjamites in charge of that city? So they could do what He wanted them to do right there. Get ready to kill the Savior. Judah became tied up, friends married to them, just in fact, almost, because the Benjamites and Judah worked together to bring forth the evil that went forth to all the earth. This is what you'll find in the Scriptures if you'll listen to me and start looking as you read the Scriptures and stop looking with Christianity glasses on. You will start seeing these things in the Scripture. They're the ones that brought the profaneness. They're the ones that brought the priesthood to Jerusalem, to the temple. They're the ones that destroyed the temple. They're the ones that formed the huge, magnificent, strong empire, the Roman Empire, that took over everything in the other three before it and became so strong they controlled the whole world before they fell to pieces and was. Of course, the religion never did. The religion that followed them, they're very much alive in Rome and controlling the kings of the earth now, universal, as their name implies. But these are the tribes of Benjamin and Judah. They're the last ones to leave the temple, but they made sure it was destroyed, and Jerusalem was practically destroyed, and they thought they had the House of Yahweh wiped out before they left, but they found out they didn't, so they started running crusades after that. After they plowed Zion like a field, after they removed every stone from the temple, then the priests went to Rome. You can look in history and see where their general took the the artifacts to from the temple. Titus, he took everything out of the temple and took it to Rome, along with the priests, what priest was left there. I'm telling you the true history of Christianity here. You won't find this in the dictionaries and things, but you'll certainly find it in the book. Well, here now, what we see is one of the Benjamites. This is just showing you what they were like and what it would be in the last days. They had an attitude of evil and kill, and they were taught to enjoy it. How many people here would be able to stand and look in an arena? Probably more than you think, because it's being drilled in your mind by television. But here's an arena, and you put men out there that refuse to fight, and they say, well, if you refuse to fight, we'll just turn the lions loose on you. And the people cheered and watched the lions tear the man's body apart and eat it. Now, how would you like to watch something like that? Well, your attitude is much different from that of the world. The most interesting bar, the one that made the most money in New York in the times of hardship, when other bars were shutting down, was ones that had the flesh-eating fish. And they had them in their bar, and they had a feeding time for these fish, and the people flocked in there at feeding time to watch these fish tear apart the ones that they dropped, the live fish that they dropped in the arena with them. Well, that's what went on in Rome among the Benjamites. It was a character that was bred into them, and Yahweh says in the last days, you're going to see it in everyone. It's going to be scattered throughout the world. If you support it, it makes you a part of it. Well, here in Philippians now, 3 and verse 5, he says, for we are the circumcision, verse 3, who worship Yahweh in the Spirit and rejoice in Yeshua, Messiah, and have no confidence in the flesh. These are words that he's quoting from Yeshua. If I came into relying on physical evidence, I would be fully qualified myself. Take any man who thinks he can trust in what he is physically. I am even better qualified. Circumcised on the 8th day of the race of, they use the race there, which is a lie, and I brought this out. It's a false word to deceive. It can't be any more than that. The word don't even mean that. It means kin or kindred. That word race there, it means stock. Means stock, S-T-O-C-K. It'd be better to translate it stock than anything, but it means kin or kindred or offspring, country, countryman, generation, even means generation. But it don't mean another race. There was only one race, if that's what you want to call it, and it was Adam and Eve, and that's it. There is no more. Of Israel. The stock of Israel. I am of the stock, or breeding. I've told you about breeding. The stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin, he said. A Hebrew of Hebrews. Concerning the law, a Pharisee. I'm a Pharisee, he said. Now the Pharisees here, let me explain quickly. The Pharisees here taught the laws. They taught the laws of the elders, and it was quite a difference. If you want to see what they taught, pick up a Talmud and read it. And you will see the Talmud teaches the law. And this is the reason they say they were trained in the law. But the problem is they were trained in what they call the oral law that was handed down by the elders. What elders are they talking about? It wasn't Moshe. Those had written laws that they followed. The laws that they're talking about and the elders that they're talking about is the ones that you see in 1 Samuel 8, where they rebelled against Samuel and said, we want a king. We don't want Yahweh reigning over us anymore. And they openly rebelled. Well, these are the elders that came down, and their allotment fell, as Yahweh saw to it, their allotment fell to give them Jerusalem. The tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. Those are the ones that took over Jerusalem and, of course, the temple. And they brought their Talmud, which was created in Babylon, and this is where Shaul was trained from the same school, the same Babylonian school. He was trained in that to bring forth the law, but the law of interpretations of the elders. Now, Yeshua sent him on a different track. The different track was still teaching the law, but it was the written law that he was teaching then, and that's what he taught thereafter. The difference in a heathen and just the regular stock is that the heathen teaches something other than the written law. Anyone outside the house is cut off from the hope, from the promise made to Abraham, as the other apostle said in Hebrews. So, of this stock of Israel came forth not just the heathen, but also those who kept the written laws. But that's the only difference in all the world. Two trees. One of righteousness, total righteousness, which is written in the laws, and one of the mixture of righteousness and evil, which is handed down by the elders, and they can't make up their mind how to keep the Sabbath. Even the Sabbath, they can't make up their mind how to keep it. Just read, get you a Talmud. They have them in English. I've had them for years. I've read you some of them. And the ridiculous things they say about how to keep the Sabbath day's journey. No such thing as a Sabbath day's journey. You won't find it in the Holy Scriptures, but you find it in the Talmud. You find it, yes, it's written in the Scriptures because they're referring to what the Pharisees taught. Shaul was one of them, a Benjamite, bringing forth the Sabbath day's journey. And if you wanted to cheat a little more by taking this, that's what they thought they were doing. They were cheating on the law. They said, "Oh, we'll protect you. We'll find the loophole to get you out of this and get you into heaven." Well, that's what Christianity is. It finds loopholes, as they say, and Jesus Christ is their biggest loophole, so they can do their evil, which is what we see throughout the earth today, and still get to heaven, as they call it. Well, that's as far as their plans go. You know, what are they going to do in heaven? Well, they don't know. Float around on a cloud with the gassy God they follow. Well, back to this now. Shaul now, he was a Benjamite, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, concerning the law, a Pharisee, concerning persecution, or persecuting the called out ones, he was one of the greatest. Concerning this, he's showing you what he is and what he can do. Look back to Acts 22. Start with verse 1. Men, brothers, fathers, listen to me. Listen to my defense, he says. When they heard him speaking to them in the Hebrew language, they were all more quiet, and he said, I am truly a Yahweh, a man born in Tarsus of Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. The law of the fathers, or as some translate it, the law of the elders. And was zealous toward Yahweh as you all are this day. I persecuted this way, this other way, this way to the death, binding and delivering both men and women into prison. The high priest and the whole council of elders can testify to this, and I also received letters from them to the brothers in Damascus. Damascus even in Damascus, where I also went to bring those who were there in chains to Jerusalem to be punished. Now, this was Shaul, a Benjamite, and of course, you see the zeal he had for this law. Today in the Catholic Church, if you know about the book, The Keys of This Blood, they trace themselves back to the Aaronic priesthood. They do not follow the laws of Moshe, the written laws. They follow their own made-up laws. And of course, this is shown throughout the Scriptures. One of the things Yeshua said, they do away with the laws to hold their traditions. Well, their traditions were oral laws, sent supposedly came down from person to person, but never was written down until Babylon. And then, of course, they wrote it in Babylon. Turn over to 1 Samuel now. I know y'all are familiar with this, but I want to get this for the viewing audience. But 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter, if you go to the 7th chapter, you will see that the Israel here, these 12 tribes, they were begging Samuel to get them out of trouble. And of course, Samuel said in verse 3 and 4 here, 3 through 6 actually, he says, get rid of your Easter eggs, stop worshiping Baal or Lord, the Lord. That's what they changed his name to later. They took out the name out of the Scriptures. The Benjamites and Yada were in charge. They were the Pharisees that were in charge of the holy writings. And Jeremiah was accusing them in his days of writing them wrong. And they took out the name, caused the people to forget the name for Lord. So he says in verse 4, don't get rid of the Baals, the Lords, the Elohim, the Ashtaroth, the Astarta, that is Easter, the goddess, the queen of heaven. And then a few years later, he got them out of the problem here. Then a few years later, they came to him again in chapter 8 and verse 1 through 9 there. You see the elders coming to him and saying, we don't want Yahweh reigning over us anymore. Well, of course, Yahweh delivered them, and he gave them their lot in Israel to take care of the temple, because that is Yada and Benjamin. Keep this in mind as you do your study. Now go back here. These are the elders that Yahweh says. He says, in verse 7, Yahweh answered Samuel and said, listen to all the words that the people speak to you, for they have not rejected you, they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, just as they have done to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt to this very day. They are now doing to you. They are forsaking me in order to serve Baal, or gods, Elohim. What's the words that they use in Israel? They use El and Elohim. What words do the Catholic Church use? They forbid the use of Yahweh. And they say, out of honor to our brothers, out of honor to our brothers in Israel, we don't pronounce the name Yahweh. So get it out of your writings. Don't use the name anymore. This is in the catechisms of the Catholic Church. You don't have to look at that, try to get one of them to use the name. It crept in, they said. It crept into the hymnals and their poems, the word Yahweh did. And now the Lord is upset and accusing the Pope of not having done his job. So the war is on earth too. Go back to Acts now and remember the word elders there, because this is what it's speaking of here. Elders. Look at verse 5. Chapter 4 and verse 5. And on the next day, the rulers, elders, and scribes. Rulers, elders, and scribes. These were the Benjamites who controlled Jerusalem. That is Yada too, the Yadiah, and look, go back to verse 1. And as they spoke to the people, the priest, the captain of the temple, and the Sadducees came upon them, being indignant that they taught the people and preached the resurrection from the dead through Yeshua. They're supposed to have been preaching incarnation. That's where that came from. It first came from Satan, who said, "You will not die." Well, that is exactly Satan's message and comes down to the Benjamites right here. So they laid hands on them and placed them under arrest until the next day, for it was already evening. However, many of those who heard the word of Yahweh, the law and the prophets, believed, and the number of the men was about 5,000. Now, this is a problem that the Roman Empire started having right here. The Pharisees started having. Because Yeshua was prophesied to come, to be born at a certain time, come and be killed by his own people. That is, the 12 tribes. The ones in control of religion. That was the prophecy. And they will lay their hands on this lamb and kill him. That was the law that he was coming to fulfill. The lamb. Behold the Passover lamb. Behold the Lamb of Yahweh. Well, the prophecy was that he would come and the whole congregation of Israel kill Yeshua. Well, he fulfilled this prophecy. And of course, the people who were looking for this prophecy, like the Samaritan woman, where I brought out last week, Yeshua started to work in Samaria there by saying, "I'm the one." He started a work that spread mouth to mouth. The same thing is taking place in these last days with the peaceful solution, because a lot of people read their scriptures. A lot of people were looking for the house before it was ever established. And people have come here telling me, I knew there would be a house of Yahweh established, but I didn't know where. So I went from place to place to place. Well, of course, they were hunting prophecy to be fulfilled. A lot of people today, it's not everybody that seeks after telephones and stupidity that wastes their time, or worldly music, or television sets. No, there's a lot of people that read their Holy Scriptures, and I'm sorry to say, it was in America more, the reading of their Scriptures, but we find it more in countries that are not developed. That is industrialized. We find it in those countries more where they're actually reading more of their Scriptures, and they know a lot of Scriptures when we start talking to them. So, and this is the way it was in this prophecy, this bit of information right here. The people that they were speaking to, they recognized this was the truth when they heard it, and about 5,000 here believed them at that time. Well, as the word spread from mouth to mouth, you see what a problem that Baal was having in Israel. So, yes, they had crusades going, and they killed a lot of people. And Shaul was responsible for the killing of a lot of people. Well, that's the Benjamites that now we see it spread throughout the earth. In the last days, I'll show you what it's going to be, he said. You're going to be facing this throughout the entire earth in these last days. Not just back here, but in the last days you will see this throughout the earth. Killing the saints, the killing of the saints. That's what Shaul's job was. Not only to arrest and to bring back for punishment. Punishment was death. If they didn't want to convert and go to Babylon and convert to the teachings of what is called the Catholic Church today, then they killed them. If they could make gladiators out of them, they would. Huge mats of spaghetti bacteria helps regulate atmosphere. This is the headline. Don't know if you can see it. Huge mats of spaghetti bacteria helps regulate atmosphere. Well, of course, this is just one of the articles. I've got several. Keep that in mind. They're proving what Yahweh says is true. they'll prove this other very soon, because we're offering peace to the world. And that peace, it won't be accepted by all, but it's going to be accepted by about 2 billion people. Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you.